Hi guys, and welcome to the Book Refuge. And I didn't mean to make this book review, but when I finished this book today, I was going about my business and I just keep thinking about it. And I haven't heard a single thing about this book, and I really had to share it. In fact, it's going to be my first must-read recommendation for 2020. I don't do those very often. I don't set my cap on books very often, but I feel like there is something for everyone in this book, and it was so much fun. So the book that I'm talking about, I've talked about in my reading vlogs recently, and that is How Rory Thorne Destroyed the Multiverse by Kay Easton. So this book is listed as adult, space opera, science fiction, fantasy, sci-fi. It's all these mixtures. I guess I would consider it adult, but it really could fit more YA. I think it's just more adult just because of maybe how the plot is set up or something. I don't know, but this is definitely accessible by everyone. There's no specific adult content. I think that maybe because just how the story's set up, that it would be considered adult, but really anyone could read this. It was such a great ride. So this book, how to break it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to give you the setup, basically what the blurb says, but in a little more detail. And then I'll just talk about some things that I like and don't like. I'm going to keep this spoiler free since most people probably haven't heard of this book. I want to have a review that I can point people to that isn't going to ruin anything for you. And if you have read it, feel free to reach out to me on my Twitter direct messages or on Instagram, and I would love to talk more in detail with you about it. Even if you leave a comment down below, just like put spoiler and ... so that nobody is spoiled if they just happen to see it. But I would love to talk with you about it if you've read it. But let's dive into this. The setup of this book is that Rory Thorne is born, and she's the first girl born into this line in 10 generations. There have been only boys born to this family. Now, it's heavily hinted in the first chapter because this is also a fairy tale reimagining. It's a mixture of a few fairy tales, but it's mostly a fairy tale reimagining of Sleeping Beauty. However, Sleeping Beauty was the great grandmother of this line. And so she was actually saved by Rory Thorne, who was the prince who tore down the thorns and rescued, and her name was Talia, but she is basically the Aurora figure. And since then, there have only been boys born to the line, and they've all been named Rory Thorne. And so half a millennia later, we get a girl born, and they just continue to call her Rory because the firstborn is always called Rory, and everything's going to be good. They're like, we're just going to go with her. However, there is a character who, his name is Rupert, and he's the vizier to the king. And he says that the last girl that was born, who was Talia, that they need to invite the fairies for her naming ceremony so they can bless her, just like happens to Aurora. And they don't believe in fairies anymore. They don't think that they're real. They live in an age of science and technology, but also a little bit of magic. Like there's this arithmancy that everyone uses that's basically like magic with technology is how I would describe it. It's used quite a bit in the story, and it gives it a little more of a fantasy element to the sci-fi parts of it. And the king is just like, yes, I trust you. Go ahead and invite them. And so he gets all the invitations written out, and then they disappear. And they disappear magically and get delivered to the fairies. Now, there's a 13th fairy who we would call her Maleficent. And the last time that she wasn't invited, she showed up and cursed the baby. She cursed Aurora on her 16th birthday. And so the king is like, well, don't invite her. We don't want that trouble around. And the vizier is like, well, last time she wasn't invited, she came and cursed the baby. So he invites her to come. And on the day of Rory's name day, by the way, I'm still in the first chapter. I promise I'm not spoiling anything. This is all in the blurb. I'm just, you know me, detail oriented. the fairies, the first 12 all show up, and they start giving her these gifts. And it's the very Aurora type gifts, that she will be beautiful, that she will be very kind, that she will be able to play the harp, and they're giving all of these gifts. And then the 13th fairy shows up. The king is like, what are you doing here? You weren't invited. And the vizier is like, actually, I did invite her because I didn't want her to feel disrespected. And so the 13th fairy is like, you're right, I was invited, but you started without me. They're all like, please don't hurt the princess, all these things. And there's a talk about like where the fairies have been this whole time, and that they didn't like what had happened to Talia back then. And so they were actually the ones who made it so that no girls were born to the line, because they didn't want the fairies to come and bless them and there be a possibility for the 13th fairy to curse this girl again. However, the queen consort had prayed for a girl, or wished for a girl, and so the fairies had granted her wish to give her a girl and made all this happen. And so the queen begs that the 13th fairy wouldn't curse her, that she would help her. And the 13th fairy says some interesting things, which really kind of sets up a lot in the story. She first explains that, you know, you don't, like, a king doesn't need to know how to play the harp. Why does the girl need to? And the king is kind of stunned by that. And she's like, that's because your worth isn't based on how pretty you look or what you can do. But the 13th fairy also says, it's not in my nature to be kind. So she curses Rory, but she curses her by saying this. Rory Thorne, I curse you to know no comfort in platitude or illusions, and to know the truth when you hear it. Which is very powerful, and we definitely will see more about that in the book. And so then the 12th fairy, just like in Sleeping Beauty, where Merryweather is able to give a gift after Maleficent does, she gives a gift that says, you will always see a path through difficulty and find the courage to take it. And so that is setting up our Rory. She has all these gifts, as well as this curse to always see the truth. It's amazing. It's so amazing how it works out. That, just like Sleeping Beauty, Rory is given an intended. When she's about 5 years old, I think she's 5, she's given a betrothed, and his name is Prince Ivar, and he's from another planet, because this is set in space. He's from a different planet, and he's kind of a weakling, and Rory doesn't like him very much, but she's very kind, so they spend some time together. And while they're playing, a half-human, who, they're not half-human, but they're people that have been advanced, so they have a little bit of, like, it reminds me of Cinder, a little bit of like cyborg technology where they replace eyes or hands or things like that with metal. And this particular guard, who had been Prince Ivar's guard, he is a suicide bomber, and he goes into the palace and he blows himself up, killing Ivar's father and Rory's father. So both of the kings are dead. So Rory's mother, who is pregnant at this time with her second child, becomes the regent consort. So she will be the queen until Rory comes of age, or I mean the leader until Rory comes of age. And Prince Ivar gets hustled back home, and there's a regent put in charge of him as well, in charge of his country. And these two countries, these two planets are at war with each other, and their marriage eventually one day will help quell that. So we get this setup of now, because, okay, so the consort ends up having a boy. So her second child is a boy. And everything that Rory was, her being the heir to the throne, her being raised to be the queen, is all taken away like that. Now she's second in line to the throne, and she will be used for her political marriage only. It's so heartbreaking to see, because where the regent consort is from, the girl could be the queen, but now she has to step over her daughter, put her baby son as the regent, and use her daughter as a bargaining chip, which is what she was used at, so she's used to it, but she doesn't want that for her daughter, but she also puts duty over everything else. So, okay, that's enough talking about that. That's the setup of our story. And now why I think you should read it. Number one, the way that it's told. So this is book one. I'm told it's supposed to be a duology. It's called the Thorn Chronicles, is like the series we're dealing with. And it's one of those where it's told by a chronicler who is very smart, very sassy. He does that thing where he like foreshadows in how they say it. Like where I said Rory gets her gifts, at the end of that chapter it says, and that is how RORY THORNE destroys the multiverse, is like the end of the first chapter. So there's lots of that like foreshadowing in kind of like a sassy way, where this is an omnipresent chronicler. They know everything that's happening, and we will kind of like, it's never like in scene jumps, but there will be different parts from lots of different people's point of view, and things like that. And so as the story goes along, the first half of it really kind of speeds through until Rory is 17, and the regent who is taking over for Ivar, he wants Rory to have to come to their planet until she's going to marry Ivar and like get used to the country, get used to the planet and get used to it, because she's going to be the queen there. And it really is kind of a trap. It's a way to hold her as leverage over the queen, the regent consort, and to really kind of mess with her. And Rory is so brave. When she is 17, she goes to this planet with just her body maid, who is this badass cyborg named Grit, who's a woman, and she gets hurt in the explosion that kills Rory's father, and so she has a metal eye and part of her body, and she is this like badass, like she was in the Marines. Like all of the women on their planet do obligatory service in the Marines. And it's so cool because she teaches Rory how to like fight, and she helps her with all of these skills, and it's very exciting. And then we have the vizier, Rupert, who I mentioned before, who also goes with to be a political ally, and then a few other bodyguards who come with too. So it's a small group that Rory trusts, and they're going to this foreign planet where she knows they want to use her, and nobody thinks that she is smart enough to handle it, which is ridiculous. She also, this isn't a case of someone who is like trying to get out of an arranged marriage. That is not what this story is about. This girl, she loves her home planet, and she wants to end this war. She wants to keep peace, and she's willing to be that bargaining chip. She's willing to do that. However, like the inside flap says, there's something going on, and there's a plot against her intended. And if for some reason him or her would be killed, this war would continue forever, and there would be like nothing they could do about it. So she has to try to save this man that she is going to marry, even though she hasn't seen him since they were 5. She doesn't have any affection for him or anything in regards to that. And she needs to try to save him so that their two planets can stop being at war with each other. And so Rory goes in against the regent who's in charge of Ivar, and he is a competent villain. I will say that. He is very smart, he is cunning, and you're very afraid of him because you know how vulnerable Rory is. But as we mentioned before, Rory has her gifts, and one of her gifts is that she will always know the truth when she hears it and see through flattery and illusion. And so the way the author does this is when someone is speaking to her, Rory hears what they really mean. And so there'll be the text saying what the person is saying. So let's say let's say the regent who brought her here, his name is Victor Moss, and he is like, "It's so happy to have you here, Your Highness." And in between his words, it'll say, "Happy to have you here. I mean, have you prisoner." And it'll say that like in between his lines. So she's always like hearing the truth in what people are saying to her. And it's a very powerful gift that the third fairy gave her. And all of the other gifts are very helpful as well. So, okay, a couple of the reasons why I should read it, and then I'll stomp out of this. It is thrilling. It, like I said, it's told in kind of a sassy way. There is very little to no romance in this. This is about a girl trying to save her planet. She isn't distracted by relationships. However, there is very strong friendships and camaraderie between her and Grit, between her and Rupert, between her and her guards, between her and a couple of people who might be allies to her that she meets. And yeah, it has some really fun fairy tale tropes in it. It has magic in it that, like I said, it's like magic over technology. It has some fun politics. Like it's a lot of politics. Yeah, and it's in space and it's fairy tales, and it was so much fun. And it's billed as like a feminist reimagining of things. And I would say that there are a lot of moments that are very powerful in that regard. But it's more of the fact of like, as you're reading this, you just want justice for people. And it's that thing where your character, who is constantly doing what's best for her planet, for her country, is still told that she's not doing it the right way and not doing enough and not being the princess that she's supposed to be, when she knows what's on the line and she is smart and she's rarely impulsive. And she has people around her who are smart. Like, there's no stupid people in this book, and it is so great. Nobody is making stupid decisions. They just sometimes get outsmarted by other people. And I love that. I love that so much. There was never like parts of this book where I'm like, Rory, you're being so dumb, or like miscommunication is not a thing in here. It's just, is someone smarter than you? Can you figure this out? Can you see the whole chessboard and figure out what moves are being made? And I just think it's so powerful. And I really am sad that this book is like falling through the cracks. I hope it can be revived and be like a cult hit. This only came out in October, so it's not like it was that far away, but I only found it because Barnes & Noble over Christmas did this cool thing where like all the new releases in like every kind of genre they had on this big display. And I saw this super cool like space pattern, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what this is about. And the inside flap said space retelling of fairy tales. And I was like, ooh, Cinder, or like, ooh, this looks fun. And that's why I picked it up. And it was so much more. Like, it had me so excited to pick it back up. And the characters were so engaging, and the story was fascinating, and it was just a wonderful read. So that's been my first must read of 2020, my first review that isn't for Outlander of 2020. And I really hope that you will give this book a try. It was so great. Like, it was so much fun. I can't say anything else about it. It was 5 stars, maybe even a 6-star for me. And I gave so many books 5 stars in January. January's not even done yet. And when I look at which ones are 5 stars, this one was my favorite of those. So what can you do? So thank you so much for joining me. I really haven't spoiled anything for you. I promise. There's so much more going into this. Tell me if you've read this. Reach out to me. I would love to talk about it. I love Rory so much, and I just want to gush with you. So thank you so much for watching. I put up new content 3 to 4 times a week. Who knows? This is a bonus video because I just have to get it out to you. So please reach out to me anytime and subscribe for more content. Have a wonderful day. Bye.